The rains had stopped by the time they buried Pa Alufmi and Mama Rank. The red soil of Okoto was soft that day, the kind of soft that only happens after a long rain. The earth opened up and took them in, slowly and quietly, the way the earth takes everything, without asking any questions. The sky above had turned gray, like it was thinking about something sad but could not quite cry anymore. 12-year-old Adébáyọ stood between the two freshly dug mounds of dirt. He was wearing an agbada that was too big for him, borrowed from someone's older son. The sleeves fell past his hands and the hem dragged through the red mud, but nobody said anything about it. Nobody was really looking at the boy. They were all looking at the holes in the ground. Adébáyọ did not cry. It was not because he was brave. It was because he had already cried every single tear he had in the 3 days before the burial. He had cried so much and for so long that now there was nothing left. He was hollow, like a gourd with nothing inside. Just a small, thin boy in borrowed clothes, standing in the mud, trying to understand how a motor accident, one single afternoon on one single road, could take away his entire world. His father, Pa Alufmi, had been a schoolteacher. He was a tall, quiet man who read books aloud on the veranda in the evenings. He used to say that words were the most important tools a person could own. He had taught Adébáyọ to read before the boy even started school. His mother, Mama Rank, had sold colorful fabrics at the market. She had the kind of laugh that was so big and so loud that people 2 whole market stalls away would stop what they were doing and turn around to look at her. Her laugh sounded like good news. It filled whatever room she was in. Before we continue, if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We always enjoy seeing how far these stories reach and connecting with viewers from around the world. Now, let's get back to the story. Now both of them were gone. The accident had happened on a Tuesday afternoon, on the newly tarred road outside of town. A lorry had crossed into their lane. That was all anyone knew. That was all the story there was. The whole village had come out for the burial. Men wore their best agbadas. Women wrapped their heads in osso oak cloth, their faces solemn and still. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' wrappers with wide, curious eyes. There were prayers and songs, and the sound of people weeping filled the red dirt clearing beside the compound. At the front of the crowd, standing beside Adébáyọ, was Chief Ṣàngódoyin Akinyemi. His uncle. Chief Ṣàngódoyin was a big man in every way. He was tall, wide-shouldered, and heavy in the way that powerful men get heavy, not from hunger, but from comfort. He wore expensive clothes and carried himself like someone who expected other people to move out of his way. When he walked into a room, younger men sat up straighter without even realizing they were doing it. His name alone was enough to make people nervous. He placed both his large hands on Adébáyọ's thin shoulders. The hands were heavy. They felt like something official, like a rubber stamp being pressed into paper. He looked out at the crowd of relatives and elders with the expression of a man who is doing something very noble. "Do not be afraid," he said. His voice was deep and loud, meant for everyone to hear. "I will take care of everything." The elders nodded. The women pressed their palms together in quiet approval. A few of them murmured to each other, "What a good man! What a fine uncle!" Not every man would step forward like this for an orphan child. Chief Ṣàngódoyin was truly a man of honor. The boy was only 12 years old, but he was not foolish. His father had raised him to read carefully, and that meant reading people, too, not just books. He noticed that his uncle was speaking to the crowd much more than he was speaking to him. He noticed that the heavy hands on his shoulders were performing, putting on a show for the people watching. He noticed all of this. But he pushed those thoughts deep down inside himself. He was 12 years old. He was frightened. He was completely alone. And he needed someone to hold on to, even if that someone was only putting on a show. So he allowed himself to believe the words. He let the promise settle into his chest like something warm, like a small fire on a cold night. He had no way of knowing, could not have known, that within a single year, those same large hands that promised to protect him would be the very hands that pushed him out of his own home. 6 days after the burial, Adébáyọ packed everything he owned into one bag. 3 shirts. 2 pairs of trousers. His father's old wristwatch, which still kept perfect time. And a small photograph of his parents on their wedding day, his mother laughing, his father looking proud and embarrassed at the same time. He carried the bag to his uncle's compound and moved into a small room beside the kitchen. He was told to be grateful. And he tried to be. But strange things began almost immediately. Men Adébáyọ had never seen before started coming to the compound. They carried folders and briefcases and wore clothes that were too clean for a village. They sat with his uncle for long hours behind closed doors. Sometimes the ceiling fan was not loud enough to hide his uncle's voice, and Adébáyọ would hear pieces of the conversation floating out: land, title, signature, the boy is too young to understand. Adébáyọ was 12 years old. He did not know what a land title was. But he knew how to listen. And what he heard made him feel cold in the middle of his chest, even on warm afternoons. His father had owned land. 3 good plots on the best side of Oodua, right near the road the government had recently tarred. Pa Olufmi had spent 15 years saving and paying for that land, little by little, the way a careful man builds something that is meant to last. He had told Adébáyọ about it many times. That land will be yours one day, my son, he used to say. It is your foundation. No matter what happens, do not let anyone take away your foundation. Pa Olufmi had planned for many things. He had not planned for his own brother to be the one standing between his son and that foundation. By the time the dry season arrived, Chief Ṣàngódoyin had already set his plan into motion. He found a lawyer, a man from the city who wore shoes so shiny you could see your own reflection in them. The man carried a leather briefcase that smelled of new things. He and the chief sat together often, and papers moved between them, and signatures appeared in places where they should never have appeared. Nobody asked Adébáyọ anything. Why would they? He was a child, they said. He did not understand these things. His uncle was handling everything for his own protection, for his own good, because the chief was a responsible man and the boy was only a boy. The compound that had belonged to Pa Olufmi. The house where Adébáyọ had learned to walk, where he had sat on the veranda and listened to his father read aloud in the evenings, was registered in Chief Ṣàngódoyin's name before Adébáyọ turned 13 years old. The 3 plots of land near the tarred road were gone too. The family home. The foundation his father had spent 15 years building, piece by piece, with the hands and savings of a schoolteacher who believed in doing things the honest way. And when the boy began to ask questions, quietly, carefully, the way a frightened child asks questions, his uncle looked at him across the dinner table with cold, flat eyes. You should be thankful I am feeding you, Chief Ṣàngódoyin said. Stop asking things you do not understand. That night, Adébáyọ lay in the small room beside the kitchen and stared at the ceiling. He could hear the generator humming outside, the sound of his uncle's comfortable life going on and on like nothing had happened. He reached under his pillow and took out his father's wristwatch. He held it against his chest in the dark and felt the faint tick-tick-tick of it against his ribs. He made 2 decisions that night. The first. He would not forget what had been done to him. The second, he would not do anything about it yet. First, he would survive. First, he would grow. First, he would become someone who could not be waved away like a child asking a question he did not understand. Then, when the time came, he would understand everything. Life in his uncle's compound was not cruel in the way that makes people around you notice. There were no beatings. There was food on the table. There was a roof over his head. But there was a particular kind of coldness that settled in, the coldness of a person who has gotten what they wanted from you and now sees no further use in you. Chief Ndoyen looked through Adébáyọ more than he looked at him. The boy was simply the child in the room beside the kitchen. Useful for small errands. Tolerated at meals. Mostly invisible. His uncle's wife was not mean, exactly. She gave him food and occasionally reminded him to wash his school uniform before it got too dirty. But she did not see him either. He was furniture in her house, present but not important. At school, things were different. His father had given him something that Chief Ndoyen could not forge a signature on and put in his own name. Pa Olufemi had given his son a love of reading, a habit of careful thinking, and the belief that understanding things fully was the most powerful tool a person could carry. Adébáyọ sat in his classrooms and he studied the way people study when they know that their mind is the only property they have left. He was not the best student in every single subject. But he was the most determined person in every room he sat in. He stayed after school when his classmates had gone home. He read by the small yellow light of a kerosene lamp when his uncle switched off the generator at night. He asked his teachers questions that made them blink and look at him differently. He was building something. Nobody could see it yet. But it was growing, quietly and steadily, like a root pushing its way through hard ground. His teachers began to watch him with something close to pride. There was one teacher in particular, a thin woman named Madame Okonkwo who taught English and literature, who told him once after class that he had a mind that was going somewhere. "Don't waste it," she said, looking at him seriously. "A mind like yours belongs somewhere bigger than this classroom." He did not forget those words. His uncle noticed none of this. Why would he? He had already taken what he wanted. The boy was unimportant. The boy was nothing. He was wrong about that, as powerful men who underestimate quiet children often are. But he would not discover how wrong until it was far too late to change anything. At 14, Adébáyọ failed to win a prize he had worked hard for, and instead of giving up, he worked harder. At 15, he won second place in a state essay competition. At 16, he won a scholarship, a full scholarship, to a better secondary school in the city of Ibadan. He packed his one bag. The same worn bag with the corners going soft, still holding the watch and the photograph. He walked out of his uncle's compound, and this time he did not feel the cold hollow feeling of the night he had arrived. He felt something else entirely. He felt the future pulling him forward. The city did not welcome Adébáyọ or wish him luck or ask about his past. Lagos received him the same way it receives everyone. With noise, heat, and the pressing company of 10,000 other people who were all trying to become something, all at the same time. He won another scholarship at 18 and entered the University of Lagos to study law. The room he rented in Surulere was in a face-me-I-face-you building, which is what Lagosians call the long, narrow houses where everyone's door opens onto the same narrow corridor and you are always aware of your neighbor's business, whether you want to be or not. He shared the room with 3 other students. The bathroom tap worked for only 1 hour each morning, between 4 and 5, so you had to be awake early or you would miss it. The walls were so thin that he could hear conversations in the next room as clearly as if they were happening inside his own head. None of this discouraged him. He had learned, in the small room beside the kitchen in his uncle's compound, how to focus in uncomfortable conditions. He had learned that silence and patience were tools, not weaknesses. He had learned that slow, steady work in the dark could produce results that surprised people who had never bothered to watch. He studied law the way he had studied everything since he was 12 years old, completely, carefully, and with a feeling underneath it all that was more powerful than simple ambition. Other students studied law because it was a good career. Because their parents wanted it for them. Because it sounded important. Adébáyọ studied law because he had been a 12-year-old boy standing in red mud, listening to a man use official-sounding words to explain why a child's future now belonged to someone else. He had watched his uncle sit across a table from him and say, "Stop asking questions you do not understand," as if the questions themselves were the problem rather than the theft. He understood now what those papers had been. He understood what land titles were, and what fraudulent signatures were, and what a shiny shoe lawyer from the city could be hired to do by a powerful man who did not want to be caught. He understood all of it. And he filed every piece of that understanding away carefully, the way his father used to file his teaching papers, organized, labeled, and easy to find when needed. He graduated from the University of Lagos near the top of his class. Then he studied for further qualifications. Then further still. He joined a small legal firm in Lagos and spent 2 years learning what courtrooms actually looked like from the inside, not from textbooks, but from standing in them, watching how arguments were built and how evidence was presented and how a judge's face changed when they heard something that could not be argued against. Then he moved to Abuja and joined a larger firm that specialized in property disputes and land rights cases. He was good at this work. He was more than good. He was gifted in the specific way that only comes from having been personally and deeply wronged by the very system you are now learning to navigate. He understood land law the way you understand a wound you have been carrying for many years, not just the surface of it, but everything underneath, the nerve, the bone, the place where it still hurts when you press it. He took on clients that other lawyers said were impossible cases. Old men from villages who had been signed out of their land with documents they never fully understood. Widows who had nothing to prove their ownership except a torn paper and a memory. Children grown into adults who came to him with the same look in their eyes that he had seen in his own mirror at age 12. The look of someone who has had their foundation pulled out from under them and cannot understand how it happened so fast. He worked for all of them with a focus that went deeper than any salary could explain. He knew exactly what it felt like to stand at a graveside with your future being taken apart behind your back while everyone else was looking at the holes in the ground. That knowledge made him exceptional. In Abuja, they began calling him the Quiet Hammer. It was a name that fit him perfectly. He did not shout in court. He did not wave his arms or raise his voice or perform for the gallery. He simply built his cases the way a careful man builds a house, one solid brick at a time, placed precisely, until the structure was too complete and too strong to be knocked over. When the Quiet Hammer finished presenting a case, the other side often went very quiet, because there was simply nothing left to say. His name appeared in legal journals. Other lawyers called him when they were stuck. Younger lawyers watched how he worked and took notes. And through all of it, quietly, in the back of his mind, he kept a file. Not a metaphorical file. A real one. A physical folder he had started years ago and added to whenever he found something new. It contained copies of the original land documents from his father's estate. Records of the payments Pa Olufemi had made over 15 years. A careful analysis of the signatures that had appeared on papers in 1999, signatures that should not have been there, on documents that should never have existed. He had known for a long time exactly what had been done. He had known exactly who had done it, and how, and with whose help. He had been waiting not because he was afraid, and not because he had forgiven anything, but because timing matters. Because a case brought at the wrong moment can be lost. Because a man who knows how to be patient is more dangerous than a man who acts in anger. He had been patient for 25 years. He had been building something. Quietly. Carefully. The way his father had built 3 plots of land, piece by piece, until they became a foundation that was supposed to outlast him. Adébáyọ was 37 years old when his mobile phone rang and an Okodo number appeared on the screen. He was sitting at his desk in his Abuja office. It was a good office. Not flashy, but solid. Bookshelves on 2 walls, filled with legal texts and folders arranged by case and year. A window that looked out onto a quiet street where ordinary afternoon life was happening below, a man selling water from a cart, 2 women walking quickly in the same direction, a group of schoolchildren in uniforms moving in a loose, wandering way that children move when nobody is pushing them to hurry. He looked at the phone number for a long time before he picked up. He already knew, in the way that people sometimes know things before they can explain why, who was on the other end. Chief Ndoyen's voice had changed. It was still deep, still the voice of a large man, but the confidence had gone out of it. The volume was still there, but the weight behind the volume was gone, like a big drum that has been kept too long in the rain and now sounds hollow when you hit it. He coughed twice before he even started speaking. He called Adébáyọ by the short familiar name that only family used. Bayo. The name nobody had called him in over 20 years. He said he hoped Adébáyọ was well. He said he had been hearing good things about him. He said, and this was the most extraordinary sentence, delivered in a voice that seemed not to notice how extraordinary it was, that he was proud of the man the boy had become. Adébáyọ said nothing. He listened. Chief Ndoyen explained his problem. The government had announced a major road expansion project in and around Okodo. The new road was going to pass through the older part of the village. Several properties along the route had been marked for compulsory acquisition, meaning the government would take them, paying compensation to the legal owners. And here was the problem. The large compound that Chief Ndoyen had built on the land he had taken from his dead brother's estate. The land that had been registered in his name with the help of a shiny shoe lawyer in 1999, was now at the center of a serious legal dispute. Developers had moved in with papers of their own, claiming prior rights to the property. The shiny shoe lawyer had died 3 years ago. The chief's new lawyer was young and frightened and not at all sure what to do. Chief Ndoyen needed someone who could untangle complicated documents. Someone who understood property law at the highest level. Someone who knew how to fight these battles and win them. He needed, he said, someone like Adébáyọ. There was a silence on the phone that went on for quite a long time. Adébáyọ looked out of his office window at the ordinary street below. He thought about a 12-year-old boy in an oversized agbada, standing in soft red mud beside 2 freshly dug graves, with his uncle's large heavy hands on his thin shoulders. He thought about his father's wristwatch, which was on his wrist right now, as it always was, ticking steadily as it had ticked for over 25 years. He thought about his mother's laugh, the big, filling laugh that turned heads in a market, and how completely silent the world had felt without it. He thought about the photograph still in his desk drawer, his parents on their wedding day, young and happy and with no idea at all about the road that was waiting for them. And then he thought about something else. He thought about all the clients he had helped over the course of his career. The old farmers. The widows. The grown children who came to his office with nothing but a torn document and a feeling of helplessness that he recognized completely, because he had felt it himself at 12 years old, standing in red mud, not yet knowing that the man with his hands on his shoulders was not there to help him. He had helped all of those people. He had built an entire career, a whole reputation, a life's work, on the foundation of understanding exactly what had been done to people like himself. And in doing so, he had also, very carefully, very thoroughly, come to understand exactly what had been done to him. He had reviewed his father's original land documents years ago. He had identified the exact signatures that should not have been on those papers. He had traced them, documented them, and kept that documentation in a file that he updated whenever he found something new. He had spoken quietly to 2 elderly relatives in Okodo who remembered things from 1999 that nobody had thought to ask them about before. He had found records. He had built a case. He had always known this day would arrive. He had simply been patient enough to let it come in its own time, when all the pieces were in the right places and nothing could be argued away. "Uncle," Adébáyọ said, when the silence had stretched long enough, "I will come to Okodo." His uncle exhaled with relief. He began to thank him. He started to talk about what needed to be done, the paperwork, the timeline, the developers who were making trouble. But Adébáyọ was not finished speaking. "I will come," he said, "because that land belongs to me. My father paid for it over 15 years. My name is on the original deed. The papers you signed in 1999 were fraudulent. I have the evidence to prove it, and I have been waiting for the right time to bring this before a court. The government's road project has now made everything public. The right time has arrived. There was nothing dramatic in the way he said it. No anger. No raised voice. No performance for an audience. He was simply stating facts, the way he always stated facts in a courtroom, clearly, completely, calmly. Without needing the other person to feel bad in order for the truth to be true. His uncle was silent for a very long time. When Chief Ndoyen finally spoke again, his voice was different. It was smaller. The voice of an old man who has just seen, for the first time, the full size and shape of something that has been coming toward him for a very long time. Bayo, he said, quietly. I am an old man. Adébáyọ looked at his father's wristwatch. The same watch that had sat in a boy's hand in the dark of a small room beside a kitchen, held against his chest while a generator hummed outside and a man in the next room slept comfortably on a stolen foundation. The same watch that had gone to Ibadan and Lagos and Abuja and all the years in between. Still ticking. Still keeping perfect time. I know, uncle, Adébáyọ said. And I am no longer a boy. He ended the call. He sat at his desk for a moment without moving. Then he stood up and walked to the window. Below, the street was going about its business, ordinary, unhurried, unremarkable. The man with the water cart was gone. The two women had turned a corner somewhere and disappeared. Life continued the way it always does, indifferent to the large things happening in the lives of the people moving through it. Adébáyọ stood at the window and thought about Okodo. He thought about the red soil and how soft it had been that day, receiving his parents without asking any questions. He thought about the compound where he had grown up, the veranda, the kerosene lamp, his father's voice reading aloud in the evenings. He thought about the road that had been tarred, the 3 plots of land beside it, the foundation that Pa Olufmi had built slowly and carefully for 15 years. He thought about how land does not move. That was the thing about land. You could put a false name on a paper, but the soil itself did not care. It sat where it had always sat and waited. The truth did the same thing. It waited, the way patient things wait, not going anywhere, not getting smaller, simply being there until someone came along who was finally ready and able to pick it up. He was ready. He had been ready for some time. Adébáyọ returned to his desk and opened the drawer on the left-hand side. He took out the folder he had been building for years. The carefully organized record of everything that had been done, every signature that should not have existed, every payment his father had made, every piece of evidence that added up to a clear and undeniable picture of what the year 1999 had really looked like in that compound in Okodo. He placed the folder on his desk and looked at it for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called his most trusted colleague, a woman named Formidable who had worked with him for 8 years and understood property law almost as well as he did. He told her he needed to travel to Okodo. He told her to prepare the supporting documents they would need to file a case. He told her what the case was about, speaking plainly and directly the way he always did. His father's land, the fraudulent transfer, the evidence collected over many years, the government road project that had now made everything a matter of public record that could not be quietly buried. Formidable was quiet for a moment when he finished explaining. Then she said, "You have been carrying this for a long time." "Yes," he said. "Are you ready for what comes after?" she asked. "Win or lose, it becomes public. Your uncle, his name, your family history. All of it out in the open." Adébáyọ thought about that for a moment. He thought about Chief Ndoyen standing at a graveside with his heavy hands on a thin boy's shoulders, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, performing kindness for an audience. He thought about how the whole village had nodded and said what a fine man. He thought about how the whole village had never known otherwise, because nobody had told them. "Yes," he said. "I am ready." He packed what he needed and booked a seat on the early bus to Ibadan, and from there he would find a way to Okodo. He had not been back in over 20 years. He was not sure what the village would look like now, how it had grown, what had changed, who was still there and who had gone. He was not sure how he would feel when he arrived, whether the feelings would be large or small or something he could not predict. But he knew what he was going to do when he got there. He knew it the way he knew everything important, completely, carefully, without doubt. He was going to walk to the land his father had paid for over 15 years. He was going to stand on it. He was going to look at the compound that had been built on top of it with money that came from an old man's comfortable sleep on a stolen foundation. And then he was going to go to court, and he was going to do what he had spent 25 years learning to do. He was going to tell the truth, clearly and completely, with enough evidence to make it impossible to argue against. Not because he was angry. The anger had been there once, a deep, burning thing he had carried through Ibadan and Lagos and the early years in Abuja. But it had changed over time, the way fire changes when it burns long enough. It had become something cleaner and colder and more useful than anger. It had become certainty. It had become competence. It had become the quiet, unshakable ability of a man who knows exactly what he is doing and exactly why he is doing it. He thought of his father one last time before he left the office. Pa Alyufmi had been a schoolteacher in a small village who spent 15 years building something for his son. He had told that son, many times, that the land would be his foundation. He had not planned for the accident on the road. He had not planned for the brother who would arrive at the graveside with a performance of kindness and heavy official hands. But in a way that Pa Alyufmi could not have intended, and perhaps could not have imagined, the gift he had given his son had turned out to be far larger than 3 plots of land near a tarred road. He had given him a love of reading. He had given him a habit of thinking carefully. He had given him the belief that understanding something fully, understanding it all the way down to its roots, was the most powerful tool a person could own. Those were the things that could not be signed away. Those were the things that no shiny shoe lawyer could put in a briefcase and hand over to a more powerful man. Those were the things that had carried a 12-year-old boy through every hard year and every small room and every moment of hollow grief and careful patience, all the way to this office, this folder, this morning, this bus. Adébáyọ put on his jacket. He put his father's wristwatch on his wrist. He picked up the folder and his bag, and he walked out of the office and into the ordinary morning air of Abuja. Somewhere in Okoto, the red soil his father had paid for year after year was sitting exactly where it had always sat. The land had not moved. The truth had not moved. And Adébáyọ, who had spent 25 years becoming the one person in the world who could not be waved away or talked over or dismissed as a boy who did not understand, was finally going home. What do you think about this story? Did justice finally prevail, or should the characters have handled things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next captivating tale. Also, share this video with your friends and family. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.